Dignitas are a CSGO team who contain the best players in all of Denmark, nearly. The majority of the best players in Denmark in the Danish CSGO scene play in Dignitas. They're a team who they've placed top 4 at the last 2 of the majors in Counter-Strike. So in March, EMS Katowice, and then ESL1 Cologne in August. They've had a number of top 4 placings this year, and yet despite all of this, they're a team who are headed on the road to nowhere. They're going nowhere as a team. They're not advancing as a team. In fact, they've actually started to get worse as a team. So in this video, I'm going to explain what I think of Dignitas as a team and some of the reasons why they've had these problems going above being the top 4 team, and also why they're heading downhill now. So first of all, let's just describe like the current kind of climate of Dignitas by looking at their history. Okay, so they came out of a Copenhagen Wolves team. That's who they were in 2013. And back then, the beginning of the year, they started out and they had actually 4 of the 5 players who are in this team now. They had Fetish, their in-game leader. They had Cajun B, who just rejoined now, sometimes as an AWPer. They had Device, sometimes AWPer, sometimes Rifler, still in the team now. They had dupreeh, who's kind of an entry fragger. These 4 players all play in Dignitas right now. But they had 32K was the 5th player, and he's now their manager. Now, instead of him, they have Zipnix now, who they got from Fnatic in 2013. So they started last year with that team. That's a key point to make here, because it's one thing if a team changes players or they have an increasing set of results, and you say, okay, they haven't had enough time to figure something out, or once this player gets comfortable in his role, that's what's going to take them to the next level, or there's something to figure out here. This is a team that's had these lineups, as you're going to see. They've tried the same players in and out of the lineup, going out, coming back in 3 months later. Similar sort of results are happening over and over, and the trend continues. It's actually one of the teams where we've got some of the best data for them because the trend is almost continuous. So in 2013, initially the team we all knew from Denmark was Western Wolves. It's a very tactical team based on the star power of Nico, but the rest were all tactical players. Glaive, the in-game leader. Pimp was kind of like a middleman. That team got their 2 second places, Copenhagen Games, Mad Catz Vienna, and then we were all looking at them. But then crucially, the Copenhagen Wolves team came along. They started beating that Western Wolves team domestically, like around May in 2013. And then from the middle of the year onwards, it was all Copenhagen Wolves was the best team from Denmark. They consistently placed 5th to 8th at tournaments, at the EMS tournament, the DreamHack tournament, DreamHack Winter. Their problem was they would always run into NIP and Very Games, who were the 2 best teams at the time, and they would always lose to them. Sometimes they'd take a first map, they'd surprise them, but they'd always lose in 3 maps, and some of them would be convincing. So they were stuck at that 5th to 8th level at the end of the year. Now coming into 2014, they took out Nico, who they'd had for a little while, borrowed from Western Wolves when that team had broken up. They brought Cajun B back in. They joined Dignitas, they became the Dignitas team, and they got this result where they came top 4 at EMS Katowice. This run, they'd been so good right up until the top 4, and then NIP just smashed them completely in 2 maps. The very next tournament, like a month later, Copenhagen Games, they finished top 4 again. Again in the semi-final, they met NIP. This time, they went really close. They had a really awesome Inferno, lost in overtime. Lost the second map reasonably close. Still ended up losing in 2 maps. So, okay, they were stuck at the top 4 level. They got to semi-finals. They used to be going to quarterfinals. Now they're at semi-finals. The problem here was, it looked like, how are they ever going to get past that point? Like, coming top 4 repeatedly like that will get you like status. Like for me, that's when they went into the top 4 of the world rankings. They had the consistency, and versus other teams aside from elite teams, they clearly were very good and they could be expected to win. But something was blocking them here. So Cajun B went out of the lineup not that long after the Copenhagen Games result. In came AZ, this young player they were going to try out. Is actually a new name for their lineup, one they hadn't tried in the past. They went to Gfinity. Wow, they beat NIP in the quarterfinals. First time they've beaten NIP in a best of 3 on LAN. Get to the semi-finals, face Virtus.pro. Virtus.pro beat them, smash them, win the event. Top 4 again, denied again. ESL1 Cologne, the next major comes up. They get to the semi-finals. This time they play Fnatic, who's a new luck team. This time, again, the excuse can't be, let's Very Games, or it's NIP. Now you got a new luck team. They still lost in the semi-finals. So you can see the point here is, now that you're losing to all these different teams in the semi-finals, it's not even just the opponent. It's not just that the opponent's a world-class team, which all these teams were. It's that there's something wrong with your team. Something wrong with the players, or the structure of the team, or the style of the team, or the mentality of the team. That's what we're going to go into here. So the problem is, 2013, rising talents, quarterfinals, showing good performances, can't quite break through to the semi-finals. 2014, up until about ESL1 Cologne, I'd have said 2014 was about being solid top 4 team, but gatekeepers. So if you're not familiar with this term from other sports, like for boxing or mixed martial arts, gatekeeper's the guy who Well, like you say, he guards the entrance to the top tier. So if you can beat the gatekeeper, if you can get past him, then you're an elite team. You're one of the best teams in the world. You can win an event. But the gatekeeper himself, as you'd imagine in the analogy, he stays outside that area. He manages the door. Dignitas never were going to win an event. They were never going to go through the door, win the event, become the best team in the world. They were just able to beat everyone except world-class teams who'd win events, and they'd always lose to them. Especially if it was in the semi-finals, at the entrance to the elite castle, or whatever you want to call it. The throne room, I guess, would be the analogy here. So the problem here is, since then, Dignitas have actually dropped off even from that. They're not the gatekeepers anymore. At DreamHack Stockholm, they went out in the group stage and they lost a crucial game to 3D Max, the Finnish team. Now, this team wouldn't even be in my top 10. They're not even close to an elite team, and yet they lost it in a key game here to prevent them going to the playoffs. They went to Face It LAN, and again, looking at the LAN, I was expecting they can do this. They can get to a top 4 finish. They lost to iBuyPower. Again, a team that wouldn't be in my top 5. They wouldn't have been an elite team that lost to them and gave them a chance to go forwards. And yeah, that team did turn out to be very good, but still lost in very unconvincing fashion, losing on Nuke, their home map, getting smashed on Dust 2, another map you expect them to have some strength on. Going beyond that, they most recently went to the Fragbite Masters Season 3 LAN Finals, and coming into this event, now listen, admittedly they had to play Fnatic, the best team in the first round, but they got wrecked. They couldn't win on Inferno. On Mirage, they got a nice, really solid half that versus other teams you should be able to win on. They couldn't do anything T-half. They lost. They were out again. Smashed in 2. Out top 4. The same story again, except this time not even that convincing, because this time you're coming top 4 at an event where there only were top 4 teams in the offline phase, and you got there through the online phase. And here's a problem. It's not just that they always get top 4. It's not just that they always lose to the world-class team offline and don't win the event. It's not just that they smash everyone else. It's that the pattern online tells us there's something going wrong in the offline phase when it gets to semi-finals and gets deep here. Because online, they don't have that problem at all. They can win these big tournaments. They could win Fragbite Masters. They could win the Scan Invitational. They could place top 2 in Hitbox Championship. In online competitions, they're amazing. They can beat all of these players. So let's ask ourselves why. What happens in the online competition that doesn't happen in the offline competition? So now I'm going to go through some of my topics here, okay? This team has never made the final of an international LAN in CSGO. They've only ever made the final of Danish LANs. They've never made a single final. Let me just put that in context for you. Na'Vi have made it to the final of international tournaments. iBuyPower has now made it to the final of an international tournament. Clan Mystic has made it to the final of international LAN tournament. The old Fnatic lineup with Devilwalk, etc., they made it to the final of international LAN tournament. A lot of teams, when you actually spread it out, Western Wolves, all these teams at some point, when the lineup was right and the style was right and the opponent was right, they all made it. With Dignitas, it doesn't matter which one of those. It doesn't matter the opponent, doesn't matter the tournament, doesn't matter the time, doesn't matter the lineup, doesn't matter the approach they take. It's always failing at this one stage. And that's what we're going to get into now, because there's a choking problem going on here. And it stems from certain players and the approach of the team, I believe. So when we talk about the biggest choking problem, I have to categorize the player who I think has the biggest issue here. That wasn't sponsorship or anything. The biggest problem in the lineup, that I mentioned before, is actually device. Because in those online competitions, the ones they're rocking, the ones that they're finishing top 2, or they're beating NiP, and they're beating Titan, and they're beating Virtus Pro, and they're beating LDLC, and they're beating Hellraisers, Na'Vi, they're beating everyone that it matters to win or place top in these big online competitions. Online, and in group stages, and in quarterfinals, everything up to these big matches in semi-finals, Device is one of the best players in the entire world. In fact, in CSGO history, if I took out accomplishments only, he'd probably be a top 5 player of all time in CSGO. The guy's skill level is amazing. Not only that, he can do everything. Pistols are really good. Rifling is excellent. Very, very good rifling, particularly CT side Colt rifling. Thirdly, he's one of the few players who's a really good rifler, but who also can be a devastating AWPer. If he's a primary AWPer, and if his game is rolling, he is unreal. He really can be up there with the Kenny S, Guardian, JW. This sort of territory. Now, here's the problem. All of these areas take a dip off, but we'll start with the AWPing. Online, his AWPing style is almost in the category of JW. He can be aggressive. He can push corners. He can push in himself. He doesn't have to have someone else go first. He can enter. He can kill one guy, do a flick 180, kill that guy as well. Online and in group stages, this guy can tear your team apart. He should be a star player. He should be one of the best players in the world. Yet consistently, you go to these semi-finals that they've played in, and he is the main person dropping off a cliff. It's not just that he has an okay game, or he has like an okay half and then not much of a game. In general, it's hard to find a single map where he was really good on it. He's never been one of their top 2 or 3 players on a whole map or on a whole series in these times that they failed in the semi-finals. In fact, a famous one that comes to mind is in that Inferno game at Copenhagen Games, where they thought to themselves, we're going to get nipped this time. We lost to them at Katowice. Now we're playing them on Inferno again, first map. They were rolling CT side. He was rolling. Went completely off a cliff. You saw nothing from the second half. Blew the whole series. Nothing after that. He's always had this problem. And it's clearly like a nerve problem. Secondly, I get the sense that because I wonder if he's in denial about it. I did an interview actually with him as part of the broadcast for the fragbite Masters LAN. And he did seem like he understood that there was some problems going here, but I don't think he actually had a good sense of how to get over it, because the problem is a lot of players who are in that situation, people unfortunately will make it like a character flaw. Like, oh, there's something wrong with you as a person. Like, why do you get nervous, or why do you choke? Or like, oh, choker, what a loser you are, and you don't deserve to win. This is all bullshit. This is all judgmental stuff that doesn't need to be brought into the game. But it's true, you can't be considered one of the best players if you repeatedly choke in these moments, because that's exactly when the best players elevate their game, be the best player for their team, win that map, get them out of trouble, win tournaments for them. You usually win a tournament when your team's playing well, but your best player is playing at his peak level as well. And Device hasn't been able to do that. It's part of the reason Dignitas can't get over that hump. And now, in fact, they're going back a bit. So one of his problems, I get the sense, is exactly his online style and why it's so good. He's so aggressive. He's so freed of pressure. He's just playing a free-flowing game where nothing seems to be getting to him. Here's the problem. I've always said online, part of the reason why people become onliners in games, particularly in the Nordic region, you would always have some crazy player, Mane or Gigatus, these sorts of players who were nuts online, but when you got them offline, yeah, their game dropped quite a lot, actually, and they became less effective, less impactful. Sometimes they did choke and they had real problems. Part of the reason why is their style online is like JWS. It's so aggressive, it's so willing to take any shot, and nothing can stop me, and I have the confidence that they're training themselves to play. That's their everyday game. That's how I'm going to play every game. And then when they come to offline and they feel nervous and they miss those shots and it's not working, they don't keep playing that game and force themselves through it or say, listen, that's it. If I'm going to be the best player, I have to play at this. They start to think like, oh, I'm doing badly, like I'm not contributing anything here, or I'm fucking up, or that guy's out-AWPing me and all this sort of thing. So they start playing a style they never use in practice or on online games or even in the group stages in round of 8. They start playing a style they don't practice, essentially, that they don't play. Well, unsurprisingly, when you play in a way that you don't ever play, you don't ever practice, you're not going to be as good. You haven't got that core. One of the core things about preparation is, preparation doesn't mean you know exactly what you can do and you're prepared for every scenario. Preparation means you've prepared how you're going to play. So that means when you're in a pressure situation and you fall back on something, you have a routine of what you can do and how you can play now that will to a degree be comfortable. It might not be if it's a big pressure 1v3 or something, but if you know how to play versus that and you play to your style, you might not succeed, but you're at least going to have some element of comfort because it's something you've done a lot. Your body's prepared for it, your muscle memory, your mind knows how these routines play out. Now, when you get nervous and all this sort of thing, you lock off all the intuitive part of your mind. You're just operating up here. What do I do now? And I guess I'll just play more passively, and I'm not going to buy the AWP. This fetish you AWP, someone else AWP this time, caging you AWP instead, and I'll just play passive with a rifle. I'll just try and get a kill here. And, I better back off this corner because I got picked that last time. That's not how you play, and so this is a key problem. Device, the reason I've singled him out here is because to me, he's the most noticeable one. Now then, whenever they were at their best, their team really did rely on Device and dupreeh, much like the old Nip used to rely on Get Right and Forest. They didn't both have to go crazy, just like in Nip, those two didn't have to, but you needed at least one of the two to go crazy. Now, their problem was, dupreeh used to always also fall off in semi-finals, but he used to be like half decent. Like, he'd still be like second or third best, and he'd still have some okay halves and some okay games. Like, actually, he had a decent Mirage when he was at the Fragbite Masters LAN. So he didn't drop off as much, but I have noticed actually he has dropped off more in recent times. Like I think actually at the Face It LAN, he was one of the worst ones. He had his problems at DreamHack Stockholm. So him falling off as well, the 2 stars falling off is really what's contributed to this team going down. And that's your problem there. Because the 2 stars can't consistently be real stars and win when they're in the semi-final and be these monsters to carry the team and get you out of trouble and push you over the hump and help you close out a big lead. Because they can't do that, you fall back to the other teams. Now, if I was to ask some naive fan on a forum who just watches clips and looks at people's aim, they'd probably tell me every player in this team except Fetish is a star player. They'd be like, Xyp9x has got a great AK, has amazing headshotting, cajunb can be a really flashy AWP, he can really impact player. That's taking into account round of eights, group stages, online play, all this stuff. These guys aren't stars either. Like, actually, cajunb can be pretty solid, but he's not solid in the sense that he's going to be Kenny S or he's going to be a Crims level impact on the game. He's not going to be that superstar. He's just going to be a good third, or in an ideal world, you want him to be like the solid third best player in your team. If you can have him at that level, if he could play like an Olaf M role within your team, then you really would be a powerful team. If you had Device and dupreeh blowing everyone away and then he's in there solid, now you're going to be able to compete skill-wise with anyone in the server because they have a lot of skill in this team. And you're going to performance-wise be up there competing to beat these teams and win big events. But they haven't been able to do that. Xyp9x especially, I'm going to have to bring this guy out, okay, because I feel as though the problem with Xyp9x is he's always gotten too much credit for some of the flash in his game. So when he was in Fnatic, I agree, that team was terrible, the Danish lineup they had, but he was a real bright spark in it. You're like, wow, he actually does have this great AK, and he potentially could be a very good player, and he would have rounds within Dignitas. He wasn't asked to be the star player, but he'd have rounds where he'd look very good, and he'd dominate a half, and his stats were pretty good in 2013. He really hasn't emerged forwards. Like, while Device and dupreeh are stepping off, if cajunb and Xyp9x are so good, this would be the perfect time for them to come into their own. And okay, you guys, listen, you guys don't have to carry the team. We can carry the team. We'll be the stars. You just contribute sometimes and we'll pick up the slack here. These guys can't either. So it's not like they can tag team the duos of stars in and out. That hasn't been working. So going forwards, there's 4 of the 5 players. Now we come to the in-game leader. And here's where we're going to get into some of the style problems that Dignitas has. Because you always hear this thing about Dignitas, about how they're so tactical, and about how, because Fetish has this history in CS Source as one of the great in-game leaders, and he led all these teams that had varying degrees of success, top 3 places at all these LANs over the years. It's always billed as if he's in existence, as if he's a Pronax, as if he's some sort of a mastermind, like either reading the game or coming up with strats or calling them. If that's true, how is Dignitas so bad on Terror's side? The one thing Dignitas is famous for, in their peaks of play at their very best, is having these killer CT sides. That's why on Nuke they were monsters. You knew they were going to get the 11 or 12 CT rounds, and then your job's fairly easy on T side. You win a pistol round on T side, you pretty much won the game there. But even without that, you grind a couple of rounds out, you're going to creep over the finish line. Even so, they weren't the monsters who could just like beat Nip and Very Games every time they played on that map, who were also monsters on Nuke. So you can see the problem there. Those teams had awesome CT sides too, but they had some T side as well. They were the 2 best T side teams. This has always been Dignitas' problem. I'm very skeptical of anyone who's called a genius, a mastermind in-game leader. He doesn't have a T side. The best tactical teams in the history of CSGO and CS 1.6 are teams who win on the T side. They have solid CT halves, sure, but they get the 5, the 6, the 7, the 8 rounds on T side that are going to win them lots and lots of games on those very CT-sided maps like Nuke, like now Mirage and Inferno can be. The Train, obviously, in the past. This is where Dignitas has actually always failed, and this is always where they've either left the door open after they've had a strong CT half to still lose, or the CT half hasn't been enough sometimes to win them. Or it only lets them win one map, and then on a map like Inferno, which used to be a lot more both-sided, then they couldn't get it done themselves, so they would lose these series that way. When you think about how you fix this problem, first of all, I get the sense, just from looking at the team now, DreamHack Winter's 8. If they don't place minimum top 4, probably beyond that with DreamHack Winter, I would imagine either some players are gone from this lineup, or maybe Fetish himself is gone from this lineup, or maybe we have a new Dignitas. Because this is on the road to nowhere. If they can't place top 2 at DreamHack Winter, if I were them, I'd do something drastic. Because you not only need to change some players, because we're having some performance issues and we've got people in the wrong roles, or we need to especially get a psychologist in to help some people work with their nerve issues, or we need to literally ask people, listen, can you actually do the role that I need from you? You're awesome in group stages online. Maybe I need to give you a different role, and maybe I need to, okay, let's try Cajun being a star player then. You just have to do less of that. Maybe this time, Device, you're just an AWPer, and we're just going to have you as a set AWPer, but more in the role of a Smiths or a Kaylee or one of these sorts of AWPers instead. You don't have to be this star AWPer. Because for me, when they're at their best is when everything else is in place like that, and Device is that AWPer, and he does take the shots, and he does take the engagement, and he's aggressive, and he doesn't play passive and fall back and just go to the cult and just start contributing less and less and less and less and just becoming an average player in a team where they need him to be the best player, because he is the best Danish player, or he could be at least, and he is every time up until semi-finals. And he needs to not only be the best Danish player, he needs to be one of the best CSGO players in the world if Dignitas wants to have the star to allow them to win these huge tournaments. Going forwards, the other thing they have to change is their approach. This approach of these CT sides isn't enough. Listen, their CT sides are great. They have great skilled players. Somehow they don't seem to get as worried on the CT sides. They don't seem to have as many problems there. Maybe Fetish plays some great role. Maybe he has great calls for setups. He tells someone to rotate from this position. I don't know about that stuff. He could be doing something there. But you must have the T sides. That excuse can't fly anymore. You must have solid T halves, because even just adding that alone is going to elevate you to be able to win a few more of these matches. To go from a semi-final to this time you break through and make a final. This time you win maybe you go to a star ladder, you win a small event. And that's a final topic I'll talk on here. One of the big problems of Dignitas is they've gotten to pad their record a bit in a weird way. Because in CS, we tend to think of the last 4 or 5 results someone had. So when you think of their results, you think of some of the ones earlier in the year and all these 3rd to 4ths. They weren't attending LANs between them. They weren't going to LANs where they'd have had the opportunity to place worse. They didn't go to DreamHack Summer. They don't go to any of the Star Ladder. They don't go to ESEA. They don't go to these smaller LANs. And so as a result, part of that apparently is down to certain people at school, or people have been ill or something. I can't remember. I think people had to work or something. Now listen, that's their own shit to work out. But that in itself is a problem. You can't just be going to a LAN every 3 months while everyone else is trying to go to like 2 or 3 in that span of time. Because if you want to get this routine, if you want to play a lot of semis, you want to do almost that approach of like when you have a fear, what do they call it? Like exposure therapy or something. You expose yourself to it over and over again until eventually you become comfortable living in that world, because you've experienced that fear, you've experienced that pressure, and eventually it becomes everyday and ordinary and routine to a degree. I'm not entirely sure that works on its own. I think you have to work on your mental problems yourself and be honest with yourself and your teammates and find solutions to your problems. But at least it'll help to some degree. This approach they have right now is to keep doing those placings. Then when they feel like they aren't going anywhere, they're dropping off, or they have some internal issues, they just keep changing players. And they've had the same players come in and out. Device in and out of the team. Cajun B in and out of the team. They tried a bunch of the Western Wolves players in and out. They had Nico. They're going back. People have said maybe he'll come back in. They've had AZ now. This approach, the results are almost not even changing here. The style isn't even changing, no matter the players in the team. There's seriously some problems here that go beyond just changing a player in and out. Especially as I noticed the players in general who are getting changed out aren't ones who have some of their issues, at least not by their own choice. So there we go. That's Dignitas. I still think if they had the right coach, maybe one player change or shift some of the roles around a little bit, they could be more effective. They could definitely get back to that top 4 level. They should be there. For me now, they're not in the top 4. I'm probably going to put them, when I do my rankings in a day or two, I'll probably have them, I think, about 6th in the world. They should be top 4. They should have the potential to make that first final ever at an international LAN. They should be capable of winning these tournaments, especially in an era where LDLC and Fnatic hate Nuke. So let's get awesome at Nuke. Let's force them to ban that every time. And then let's use our ban for something else. You know, this is the sort of way that they could be going forward. So with this lineup of players, for me right now, it's like shit or get off the pot time. Either make this a world championship level team, or fucking break the lineup up and make 2 Danish teams. Like, take the Copenhagen Wolves and the XMG players. Let's actually make 2 teams that can be really good. LDLC and Titan style. Stop just huddling all the good talent into one team and then fucking bombing at the semi-finals or before. So there we go. They're my thoughts on Dignitas. We saw them at fragbite Masters. Very unconvincing. Now we're going to go forwards and there'll be more videos soon.